Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today on the Impact Portal. While we're waiting for everyone to join, we invite you to also participate in the first poll of today. Oops, we've just lost the screen, but I think it'll come back in a second, the Menti poll. There we go. So you can join that at menti.com and insert the code. And we'd love to hear from you in terms of what you expect from today's webinar. So we'll wait a couple more minutes and gather a few more responses, and then we'll begin shortly the webinar. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening again, everyone who's just joining. If you're just joining, we're going to wait another minute or two for more participants to join. And in the meantime, we invite you to participate in the first poll at menti.com and include what you expect from today's webinar. Thank you. Great, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone who's participated in this morning and this evening's poll at menti.com. We appreciate your responses. We do understand that you're interested in viewing the limitations, the uses, and obviously the relevance of the Impact Portal. So Neil, I think if that's it, I think we'll begin the webinar now. Thank you very much. So again, welcome everyone today to today's webinar, Unlocking Market Intelligence-Driven Decision-Making through GloMIP's Impact Opportunities Portal. And the presenter today will be Bert Leenaerts, who has led the development of GloMIP and this particular portal of GloMIP. Next slide, thank you very much. And for everyone who's joining us, just a reminder that this webinar is part of the GloMIP webinar series, which also comes under the Market Intelligence Initiative webinar series that we've begun. And the purpose of this webinar is really to provide you a more in-depth understanding, a hands-on demo presentation of the Impact Opportunities Portal section of GloMIP. And Bert, in a minute, will be walking you through that demo. And then next slide, please. Great. And so just a reminder, a few house rules. So you'll notice at the bottom of your screen that you have two essentially chats. One is Q&A, one is chat. And we would ask, just let the helicopter finish going over. We would ask that if you have any specific questions that you actually input those into the Q&A box at the bottom. And if you, in the chat box, you can use that for friendly comments or introductions, etc., or anything else that doesn't require a specific response from one of us. And also, we will be sending a post-evaluation form at the end of the webinar as well. Thank you. Next slide. And just a quick walk through the agenda. As we mentioned, most of the webinar will be devoted to an actual live demo led by Bert Leenaerts, followed by a question and answer session. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A before, and we will also be taking questions at that time, live questions as possible. Followed up by a final evaluation Menti, and we'll be announcing another webinar, upcoming webinar, and just a reminder about upcoming CJR Science Week presentations as well, being led by Market Intelligence. Next slide. Great. Well, without any further more introductions, I'll pass it over to Bert. Bert, please take it away.
All right, Lala, thanks for the introduction. So today I'll be giving a quick introduction to the impact opportunities, and then I'll give a more in-depth demo showing some applications that have been used in the past by our stakeholders. Now, before I go and explain what does impact opportunity mean, let me quickly give you a few thoughts about why we developed this tool. As you all know, we live in a world with scarce resources, and we need inputs for food, clothing, shelter, and so on and so forth. And the same is true for the CG. We're all facing limited funding. So we're really are asked the question on a regular basis, well, how can we invest our dollars where they're most needed? So we kind of built a tool to address these questions to really allow some evidence-based decision making and to allow some kind of quantitative priority setting using this impact opportunities portal. And let's make it very concrete in this brief overview. Let's say you want to know how can crop breeding have the biggest impact on poverty. So imagine you're facing this very practical question. You don't have to invent data on poverty. We all know the World Bank has data on poverty. In the slide next, you will see the $2.15 a day, very common poverty metric that exists. So there's no need for us to reinvent the wheel. You can check the data on this indicator, and then you will see if you rank the countries highest to lowest. You will see, for example, Madagascar has the highest percentage of population in poverty, followed by Congo DRC, Mozambique, Malawi, and so on and so forth. So this data exists, you can access it, but one big drawback is that the data is only available at country level. So you only have country level data to measure this poverty information. Now, we have decided to use this as a basis. So we know poverty is a kind of underdevelopment metric, as there are many. You can also look at emissions, nutrition, hunger. But even with unlimited funding, even if you were able to work on agriculture and education and everything, you can never lift everybody out of poverty. There will always be only a subset of that population in poverty that you can target, that you can reasonably expect to help to lift out of poverty. And that's what we call impact opportunity, really a subset of those bigger underdevelopment needs that are out there. Within the CG, often that impact opportunity lies at the intersection between crop consumption, crop production, and underdevelopment. So really, this is where the impact opportunity becomes apparent by overlapping the crop sphere and the underdevelopment, for example, poverty. And this is where GloMIP, or the Impact Opportunities Portal, really provides the biggest innovation. We've been able to make a lot of underdevelopment indicators available at crop level using downscaling, using spatial overlaying to really make that impact opportunity to as concrete, as relevant, as accurate as possible, again, to inform all kinds of decisions. And we can go even one step further. We can even overlay a third level by looking at where the CG is breeding for, what are kind of CG target areas, and add this in the mix again to refine those impact opportunities even further. Now, before I go into an example, let me give you a high-level view of what these impact opportunities could be used for. I already mentioned towards decision-making. Now, this kind of, next slide, please, Neil. So roughly speaking, you can divide this into two, let's say, use cases. You can use this to allocate resources. You can answer the question, should I be working within my project, my program on Africa or Asia? Where do we see trends emerging? We can even go much deeper and say, should we work in East Africa and which countries? So really use this to pinpoint certain priorities, certain needs using the portal. We can also use this to see, do we have to work more on poverty or should we invest more in climate, depending on the crop and the region? So you can really use this to really allocate your resources as efficiently as possible using all of the data that we have available. And then similarly, you can also use this to communicate to donors and different stakeholders to mobilize further resources. You can build stronger, more evidence-based proposals using our quantitative data that we make available. You can even extend to new countries. I imagine you've never worked in East Africa. Well, we provide data globally, so you can use this to explore further opportunities for expanding your current work and current projects. You might even capture less obvious dimensions like diabetes or cancer. And again, I will give some examples later about how this might look like. So really, we envision this tool as a kind of guide to make more efficient and more, let's say, well-articulated proposals to really allocate and also mobilize further resources. That's a very high-level overview. Before I go to the examples, let me share with you a very brief snapshot about how this impact opportunities portal looks like. So as you can see on top, we have a kind of dashboard bar, different fields you can use to customize the analysis. And that's really needed because we have a wealth of data available in this impact opportunities portal. So you really have to use all of these fields to make the customized analysis that you will need, that you will use in your proposal. So in total, we have 171 countries available, spanning 45 food crops. We have approximately 200 indicators, again, spanning the 5 impact areas. It is nutrition, poverty, equity, climate, and environment. The data can be used at different data levels. You can use them at national level, so crop agnostic, but you can also drill down to make it really crop specific and even go towards market segments, which are kind of like internal CG target area that we have defined to focus our breeding efforts as well. You can aggregate the data as you see fit. You can have a very high level view, a region, but you can also go down to the lowest level, which are the traits. Again, you can customize the analysis as you see fit to make your proposal, to make your allocation as accurate, as customized as possible. Now, without further ado, let me maybe get to the portal and let's look at some applications that give some guidance about how you can translate all of these needs into different actionable results. So I'll quickly take over the screen from Neil. All right. Okay. Right. Okay. So if you go to GloMIP, you have to go to glomip.cgr.org. That is the general webpage where you can find all of the data, all of the tools. Right. So in the beginning, you get a landing page, you get some metrics. I'll get back to this later, but the impact opportunities is really the first portal that is available, and I'll be talking about that one today. As I mentioned, the first thing you see is this kind of dashboard bar where you get different entry fields that you can use to customize the analysis. Now, today I will not be just showing you what it can do. I will really try to make it as actionable as possible by looking at a few applications that we have developed with our stakeholders. Let me quickly move this and pull up the applications. Okay. I hope you can see this. So these are 6 applications that have been developed in collaboration with our stakeholders, really trying to answer some very practical, very concrete questions that we have. And when we continue by looking at the first one, so within IRI, we are developing a new type of rice, which is called low glycemic rice, which can help to kind of flatten this kind of spike in sugar intake, because we know rice and cereals can be quite calorie intensive. And the question came to, well, how can we use this tool to see how this low glycemic index rice, how can this be used and where might this have the highest potential? And we know from research that this low glycemic rice is very well positioned to kind of combat diabetes, again, because it kind of flattens out the spike in sugar intake, in carbohydrate intake. So let's try to answer this question using GloMIP. So when you look at this dashboard bar, the first thing you see on the left are the different impact areas. So you can click on any of them depending on the indicator you want to see. In the application, number 1, we'll be talking about diabetes. So diabetes is clearly focused on nutrition. So let's stay on nutrition. Then the second field will be used to select a specific indicator that you want to use. So you can use the search box. You can also scroll down to see what we have available. In this case, I mentioned diabetes. So let's Google diabetes. Okay. As you can see, we have 2 types of diabetes metrics. So the first one is the global burden of diabetes. The second one is a normalized version of that, or divide per capita, which might be useful if you say, I want to compare across regions, and I know certain regions are bigger. Maybe you like to see a normalized version of this diabetes burden. So let's maybe continue and look at this per capita version. The second one is a data level. As I mentioned, you can look at the national level, that's crop agnostic, just diabetes across countries. But you can also say, well, how is diabetes linked to consumption of certain crops? And then you would like to look at the second level, this national crop. If you're a breeder or you want to do some kind of breeding specific application, you can go one level further and click at market segments. Those are also crop specific, but a smaller subset kind of CG target area that we have developed. For now, let's maybe just stay at the national crop level. The data can be aggregated by different levels. So again, you can show the data at regional level, very high level, but you can also go down and get the data for different crops, different countries, again, depending on the application that you would like to use. For now, let's maybe just stay at the regional level and stay here. You can also choose which country you would like to focus on. By default, we select all the countries. If you zoom down, you see all the countries highlighted in yellow. So these are all the countries for which we have data, and those are selected by default. Now, You can select and deselect them as you see fit, again, depending on the application. For now, let's maybe keep all of them. I'll give plenty of examples later on how you can customize this further. Similarly, we also have a crop filter. Again, by going down, you see all crops are selected by default. But in this case, we would like to see only rice. So let's click on deselect and everything is gone. And then let's click on rice to only have data on diabetes for rice consumption. If you're done, just click on run, and then the analysis will get updated and give you the results that you requested. And so it will take a few seconds, and then you will see all of the results for diabetes, for rice, for the countries, and the data level selected. So if you go down, the first text box gives you a bit of a longer definition in case you want to know in detail exactly what is being measured in this indicator. Is the definition that you see here on the screen. And going down, you see a tree map. So a tree map is a kind of a non-ranked way of showing the data because we don't want to pinpoint the number one and number two. Instead, we've shown to show the relative strength of the values using this size of the boxes and also using the colors. So tree map is kind of a non-ranked way of showing data, which we prefer in GloMIP. We can see quite clearly that this kind of normalized diabetes burden is highest in Asia, followed by Oceania, Latin America, Africa, and so on and so forth. So you can quite easily get a snapshot of how this metric is distributed, again, across regions. If you want, you can also scroll down a bit further, then you get the same information, same colors, but then using a map. And in this case, you clearly see that this kind of relative burden of diabetes is much higher in Asia. And that's why we advised in this application, or maybe focus your efforts on launching this kind of low glycemic rice in Asia, or try to select some target countries in Asia, because it seems that we both have high rice consumption and also high relative burden of diabetes within Asia. So a very concrete question that we were able to answer using this analysis. Now, this is just a visual representation. We know certain stakeholders also like to get the data in Excel. Well, if you want that, just scroll down and you can click on this button, and then you'll get all the precise numbers in an Excel sheet in case you could do some kind of follow-up analysis as well. So it's the first example about how we answered this question related to diabetes. Let me simply continue by looking at the second example. So in the second example, we were working with an NGO that like to develop a biofortified variety on maize, and they specifically wanted to biofortify vitamin A content, and they asked us, well, which country should we target? Because they only had funding for one single country, and they asked us, well, which country should we target to have the greatest impact using this vitamin A biofortified maize? And let's see how you can answer this question using GloMIP. So in this case, we had diabetes. Let me check for vitamin A deficiency. Voila. So you see immediately we have all the indicators linked to vitamin A. And in this case, let's use the non-normalized version because this NGO wants to look at the biggest impact, not normalized. So let's look at the first one, the burden of hunger due to vitamin A deficiency. Let's stay at national crop level, but maybe let's change this to country level so you can really pinpoint exactly where the deficiency is highest for countries. In terms of countries, they only wanted to look at Asia, Africa, and Latin America. So how do you do this? So quite easily click deselect all, then all countries are gone, and then you can click on the sub-regions that you would like to see. In this case, I'll use Africa, Asia, and Latin America according to the UN region. But again, you can check also sub-regions, different classifications. So you can choose whatever you want. In this case, let's keep it simple. Let's use Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and the Caribbean. Then for crops, I set maize. So let's deselect rice, and let's click on maize, and then let's rerun the analysis to see how this looks like for this burden of hunger due to vitamin A at country level. Okay, voila. So quite quickly you can see we see the highest burden is in Congo DRC, followed by Somalia, Kenya, South Sudan, Nigeria. If you go down, you can see the map again. And quite clearly, you can see already hotspotting of where you might have the highest impact using this vitamin A biofortified rice. So based on this visual, we advise to maybe focus on East Africa and Central Africa, or potentially also South or Southeast Asia, because those seem to be the countries with the high consumption of maize, but also to have a high level of vitamin A deficiency expressed in absolute numbers, not in relative numbers this time. And again, you can get the data below if you want as well. So again, very concrete, again, we try to answer this question using the data by overlapping this crop consumption, in this case maize, and then looking at this underdevelopment indicator, in this case, vitamin A deficiency. Now, let me continue by looking at the third example. The third example is about potatoes. So different breeders came to us and they told us, we'd like to work more in breeding for potatoes, but we don't know exactly where potatoes are being harvested, are being produced globally. Could you help us by pinpointing where potato production is bigger or smaller globally? And how can we do this using GloMIP? And this could be used as a tool to refine the market segments, again, to refine where the CG is working at using the market segment approach. So in this case, we would like to look at area harvested. Now, it's not obvious where this area harvested might be located. So if you don't know exactly where an indicator is located into those impact areas, you can quickly go to the indicator catalog, and there you will find all the indicators. You can use a search box. Well, just go to area harvested, and then you will see this is classified under the poverty impact area. So we know if you want this, going back to the single indicator, you have to change from nutrition to poverty, and then we can find this. So again, let's use a search box. We have area harvested here, and again, as always, we also have a normalized indicator per cup. So let's select area harvested. Let's maybe stay at country level, because what they asked for. Let's also stay at the same regions, but let's change maize to potato. There we are. And then let's update the analysis to see how it looks like. Right, so let's go straight to the map perhaps. So we can see potato, a global crop being produced and consumed in different countries. And then we have the distribution. If you want to see the numbers, you can scroll down and you can use this table. Again, you can download it. You can use this as a starting point to say, okay, we know that in Angola, we have, let's say, 120,000 hectares of potato production. How can we look a bit further? How can we look a bit deeper into Angola? Which type of potatoes are being produced? Which ecosystems, again, as a starting point to kind of guide your exercise. And in this case, you don't have to look at, for example, let's look at Benin, because we see Benin as only a marginal, almost non-existing potato production, so no need to invest efforts into doing this exercise for Benin, but you might take a look at, let's say, Bangladesh, Angola, all of these countries that have a significant potato production in their country. So again, very practical question. Moving on to the next example. So I talked about poverty and nutrition. We also get asked quite often, well, how can we check which climate hazards are affecting different market segments? Because breeders need to know, they have to work more on flooding, on droughts, on temperature, which climate hazards are affecting different market segments. And this question, again, can be answered quite readily using GloMIP. So let's change this from poverty to climates. So as you can see, we have different indicators linked to drought, flooding, temperature, rainfall, and so on and so forth. Let's maybe use drought as a percentage, or the percentage of the population that is affected by drought. And let's go to market segment. Let's really look at where the CG aims to work and really go to this market segment level specifically. You can view the data at country level, or the market segments can be viewed at country level, but maybe it makes sense in this case to also look at market segments as a kind of data visualization level as well. So 2 times we select market segment, the data level, and also how we want the data to be shown. Let's maybe stay at the same country, filter, but select all crops in this case. So select all. So you can see, you can also select the different market segments. In case you want to say, I don't want to select, let's say, this one, again, you can do that, but for now, I'll just keep everything selected in this market segment filter as well. If you're ready, just click run, and then it will give you the analysis. In this case, the visual is a bit small, so I'll maybe go to the table below to see that by default, everything is ranked alphabetically, but if you say, no, I want to see the biggest one, or just click twice. So first it goes smallest to biggest. If you click a second time, it goes from biggest to smallest. So in this case, we can see that this flooding or drought, is affecting chickpea in West Asia, but also chickpea coming a second time, but also we see barley again in West Asia. So you can see quite easily which market segments are mapped to this kind of drought occurrence, again, as a relative normalized measure. And this could be used to say, okay, maybe we have to look into different traits for barley, for chickpea, for durum wheat. that might lead to drought resistance, because we see there might be a need for that in all of those different market segments. You could do the same for different climate hazards. I imagine you would like to work on flooding. Let's do population facing flooding, again as a percentage. Click run again, and then you can check. So let's go back to the table. Let's click once, twice. And then you see a different set of crops. So in this case, we see a lot of rice coming up, this time in South Asia, but also potatoes. So then you see, okay, maybe in those regions, in those crops, it might make sense to look at traits linked to flooding, because we see there's a higher exposure to flooding for those market segments linked to those crops and subregions. So again, very practical way of checking different climate hazards, this time at market segment level. I already mentioned breeding. Now, another application that we were asked was, how can we use this tool to kind of prioritize resources for crop breeding? Because we know breeding has to allocate resources across different crops, different regions, but how can we really use GloMIP and its impact opportunity specifically to say, well, where should we invest? Where might we allocate our resources in the most optimal, the most efficient way? And that's, you see, application number 5. Now, to answer this question, we have to look a bit broader than just at poverty and climate, because we know that breeding tries to target all impact areas. It's both climate, equity, poverty, environment, and so on and so forth. So to answer this kind of multi-dimensional question, we built another tool, which we have called Priority Index. And that's really a way to combine different indicators, combine different impact areas into one single variable, one single index that you can use to answer this kind of bigger, more high-level questions that you might have. You see, we see some of the same filters coming back. The only difference is, in this case, you can select multiple indicators simultaneously. Again, by default, everything is selected, but you can do a subset if you want, as you see fit. Maybe this time go to national crop. Maybe go a bit deeper than region. Let's maybe look at sub-region by crop to really say, do we have to invest in potato in East Africa, or more rice in South Asia, or maybe lentils in Latin America? Let's look at sub-region by crop to see how we can optimize this allocation. Country filter, let's maybe do the same as before. Let's select Africa, Asia, and Latin America as our country filter. Then for crop, we were asked to only select CG crops, so we have more than just the CG crops. So let's deselect all, and then click on the CG crops, and then you only get those crops that the CG is currently working on. As you see, also a number of other filters have become active. So you can also choose to give different weights to different impact areas. You might say, my donor or my project wants to work more on poverty, but maybe less on environment. And then you can change all of these weights to reflect your preferences, to reflect your needs. We also have this present future filter. We also have data about the future. So if you say, I want to give a higher weight on future-looking data, so data on 2030, you can play with the filter to also give a higher emphasis, or you can de-emphasize that, saying, no, I only want to look at current data, I don't want to see future values. And then lastly, as I mentioned in the beginning, you can choose to select absolute or relative numbers. Remember the normalized values, we call them breadth, because, for example, population and poverty, if you want that, you can slide to the left. But you can also select prevalence and depth. Those are kind of relative normalized indicators like hunger per capita or the percentage of population in poverty, which could be useful to focus on smaller countries or focus on regions where you want to see the most marginalized, but not necessarily the biggest number. So you can also select this. If you're in doubt, we also recommend just keep it at 50%. That is a kind of a safe default that we recommend if you don't have a preference in terms of these filters. So let's click run and see how this looks like. So now the tool is calculating an index using all 200 indicators, looking at all the 5 impact areas and seeing, well, which in this case subregions by crop might have the highest impact opportunity. So you see number 1 is South Asia for rice. You see 0.22. You have cassava, Central Africa. Then we have rice again, wheat, maize, and so on and so forth. So you can use this quite easily again to get a snapshot to see, well, which regions by crop might have a higher value, this time in index value. If you go down again, you see a table. So you can also use this to rank it smallest to highest. You can also download it as before to really see how this looks like. We also have sub-indices. So this index only looks at one impact area. Then you might see that rice in South Asia scores actually a bit higher on nutrition, but much lower on environment. So you can also see how this index differs by the different impact areas. So again, you can use this however you see fit, but this table gives you already a very rich view on the data, again, looking at all impact areas available. And this actually was the last applications. We also got asked by donors, well, how can we see how different crops are distributed across different impact areas? And again, this table gives you good views. You can check not only the general index, combining everything, but you can also check the different indexes to see, well, some crops might have a bit more leverage on poverty, while others might have a bit more leverage on environment and climate, depending on the country, depending on what the climate is there, depending on the development cycle that country or region or whatever might be located in. So I think that's it. That was the last application I wanted to mention. So now I'll move it back to Laila to see, or to Neil, I think, to go back to the presentation and give you some success stories we have had with this tool.
Great. Thank you very much, Bert, for that very interesting demo. And we do have some questions in the chat, which I think I'll start with. And then also for everyone else, if you'd like to raise your hand, we will also let you speak. So first, I'll kind of wedge some of these questions. So I'll start with you, Gary. You mentioned that it'd be very helpful for breeding investment cases if we could model different rates of productivity improvement due to breeding. So I guess sort of a question, Bert, it's the last question in the Q&A box.
Yes, that actually is a great question, and that's the next level of development. So at the moment, we're indeed working to go to the next level and not only say, well, what is the level of poverty, but how many people can be lifted out of poverty with a certain productivity increase X or Y? And that's really the next level, and we hope to unveil that very, very soon. So that is coming, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks. We might be unleashing that next level of impacts at crop level.
Okay, moving on. Our first question from David Spielman. So, Bert, great presentation. And as he mentions, he's also a big supporter and user of GloMIP. Looking forward, he'd like to know, what are your thoughts on the prospects for computational modeling with these data? After all, there are complex impact pathways and quantitative relationships that need to be considered when investing in an opportunity. $1 spent on breeding and delivery of genetic gains for country X, crop Y, and trait Z will not have the same effect on poverty as another set of countries, crops, and traits. Poverty elasticities of ag R&D spending, cross-price elasticities of demand for food items, etc. These are the key elements of translating increased investment into measurable impact scenarios. Is this the next frontier?
Yeah, great question. This, I think, relates to what also Gary was mentioning. So at the moment, we just have pre-technology estimates looking at the under development. But the next level is really to say, how can we scale impact methods to say, how might a 10% yield increase for this crop in this country lead to a concrete reduction, let's say modeled reduction in poverty? And that is indeed the next level that we're developing. And we hope to do this in the next couple of weeks. And we're always looking for more feedback, more collaboration to refine those estimates and get more expert opinion to make those estimates as credible as possible.
Okay, moving on to the next question from Jorge. So really nice tool and with a lot of potential. I see that the search process for answering the questions can be a bit tricky. Are you planning to use natural language processing so that the tool becomes more user-friendly?
Yeah, that's a good question. In fact, we already used ChatGPT to see if we could answer some of the questions. So we're experimenting with that. I don't know if it will be coming anytime soon, but indeed, this kind of chatting tools are very convenient, and we might explore using them in the future. Indeed, that's a great suggestion, so thank you for that.
Okay, so we also have another question, which is a little bit more building blocks question, let's say. How is a market segment area estimated?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the data at national crop level, that's just all of the area for second crop, that comes mainly from FAO. The market segment data is estimated internally. We use a protocol for that. So we look at what is the area. For example, we know there's X area for potato in Kenya. And then we try to see, okay, how many ecosystems are there? How many areas can we working on depending on the stakeholders we have. So it is a very consultative process, taking into account different estimates, and I have to send you the protocol to really answer that in depth. It depends on different things. We like to look at the stakeholders, also the area available, different things go into that question.
Okay, and just a follow-up question to that. So the total area for fava bean in Ethiopia is 0.5 million hectares, but the market segment on the website, I'm presuming GloMIP is 120,000.
Yeah, so that again, that depends on many factors. It might be that this fava bean is only in the market segments. I mean, might only be focusing on one ecosystem because that's where we've been breeding for, and that other ecosystems have been left out in this phase because we cannot breed for everything. So we have to really pinpoint the areas to something that's small, like in the national area, to focus our efforts. I cannot answer the exact question for Ethiopia in fava bean, but the aim is really to kind of go down a bit and not focus on all the area again to focus and kind of prioritize our efforts in doing breeding.
Thank you. Another question from Edgar. Hi, Edgar. How often are data in GloMIP updated?
Yeah, also a great question. So in terms of the market segment data, I think it will be updated probably weekly. In terms of the indicators, yeah, that depends a bit. Like poverty doesn't get updated every year. That might be only every 2-3 years. But the market segment data should be updated quite frequently. I guess weekly, 2 weekly, something like this. I think we're aiming for.
Great, thank you. And from Thierry, about the data sources, does the system include an assessment of the quality of the data sources? For example, an indicator of the reliability of the data depending on how they were collected, whether they are primary or secondary data, etc.
It's a good question. So generally, we try to take data from either accepted sources like the World Bank or FAO, or we take data from papers. We kind of assume that they have been peer-reviewed by the sources where we take the data from. We don't do that much. We do some data balancing as well internally, but it's limited. We just take the data as is with some smoothing, some removing of outliers, but we don't do a full-fledged checking of the data, no. But to comment on that a bit further, so we know that every data source has its own, view, and even if you measure poverty with different data sets, it looks always a bit different, and that's why we also have invented this priority index, because by combining different indicators, you get a much more robust estimate than only looking at one single indicator from one single source of data. So by combining multiple indicators, we think you can get a more robust estimate of impact opportunities, and you can do that again using the priority index.
Thank you. And again from Gary, the tool is very impressive. It would be helpful if we could look at crop productivity improvement rates over time by country and region, both for individual crops and crop group. Can we look at building this capacity? Good scripts exist for this, but it would be great to have this in GloMIP.
That's a very good question. And in fact, if you go to GloMIP, there's, I think, a link, further resources, further websites, and they will find a link to a different tool, which is called the Crop Observatory. And there you can check crop productivity improvements for different crops and different countries across time. So it gets available in a separate tool that you can find. And I'll show that later when I go to the Q&A live. I'll show that link where you can find that tool.
Great. And finally, great, impressive presentation. A tool which can save time for researchers. How would you cite the outputs from GloMIP in the development of proposals? Is it acceptable to all donors, investors?
Also a good question. So in the next session, I will explain how you can cite the data. We have already prepared that. Is it acceptable to donors, investors? Well, difficult for me to answer, but the donors we have interacted with were really excited and did seem to appreciate this kind of tool. So we have not gotten any negative reactions on using this for proposals or for different interactions with donors.
Okay. And those are the questions right now from the Q&A box, but we also encourage you to raise your hand, participants, and you can ask the question live to Bert if you prefer. Currently, yes. I don't see any hands raised.
Maybe we can go to the slides that Neil has, and if people have questions during the meantime, they can type them and we can come back to them after the next session.
Certainly. Neil? Okay. So these are some of the frequently asked questions that we have. Go ahead, Bert.
Yes, I'll try to answer those live using GloMIP again, because we did get some of the questions more frequently. So I thought, well, let's go into some more detail on those questions. So one of them is about how to cite the data, how to download the data and the visuals. Can we add more indicators? And then finally, also one about timing. What is the timing of the indicators that are used? So again, I'll take over the screen from Neil, right? Okay, so let me go quickly back to GloMIP. So the first question was, how can we cite the data? So let me quickly go maybe back to the landing page of GloMIP. Hope you can see this. So on the landing page, if you go down, you can see different types of information about the protocol, what is the aim, what kind of problems do we solve. And really at the bottom, you can see a suggested citation. So if you would like to cite GloMIP, we would encourage you to use the citation. And don't forget to always add the date, because GloMIP gets updated very regularly. So always add the date. We'll know at what time this data was accessed in case different versions might be existing over time. So you can use this to cite GloMIP in general as a platform. If you like to cite specific data sets, let me jump back into the Impact Opportunities portal. We also provide all of the references for the data that we use to build GloMIP. You can also direct to those links, to those resources if you want. So by default, it gives you undernourished populations. So I'll use this as an example on how to say you can find the data. So you will have to scroll down at the bottom, and then you can see a field called data source. And then you can see this data comes from FAO and also from the World Bank. And we always try to provide either the article or the link, the website we got the data from. So if you want to check where the data coming from, really scroll down to the metadata section and check those data sources. You can also find them in the indicator catalogs. If you go back up, so there's a catalog. This is basically an overview of all the indicators. So if you want to see where the data comes from, really scroll down to the last column, and then you'll see again data source for this indicator, undernourished population. And you can really go down to all the indicators and check where the data comes from. So you can cite both ways. You can cite GloMIP, but you can also cite this data source directly in case you prefer it that way. I think a second question, let me quickly use my cheat sheet to see which was the second question. So the second question we get quite frequently is, how can we download the data sets and the visualizations? How can we access them for use in presentations, proposals, and so on and so forth? So let me go back to the single indicator. So the visuals, we don't have a separate download button, but you can download them quite easily by clicking right mouse. Then you can click copy or save as. As you can see, my laptop is in Dutch, so I guess most people will be able to read it, but just do the right mouse click and then you can copy it, and you can copy it straight into your presentation or into your proposal, your Word file, anything that you want to use it for. If you want the quantitative data, again, go down to the table. Then you can click on Excel and it will give you a table to download. And this is available both for the single indicator, but also the priority index. If you could download this nice table of indices across the impact areas, that also can be downloaded as well, and also the indicator catalog. So whenever you see an Excel button, well, just click on it and you will get all of the data. So I'll just show it. So again, you see data table for the indices. If you click here, you can get the data in case you want to use it for a different application, a different follow-up of the data. I've also wanted to mention, we also have a help page that we built on GloMIP. So we already added some of those questions that we got frequently that you can check also in this help page here as well. So if you have a question, always feel free to reach out, but please also do check this help page in case your question might already be answered in this help page. Let me quickly check again. What was the third question? So can new indicators be added? So in the beginning and also still now, people come to us and ask, well, I need data on this. We don't see it. Can we add it? And the answer is definitely yes. If you have data that is global in coverage, so we cannot use data on only one country or only one continent, it has to be fairly global in scope, then we can add the indicator in a GloMIP. So please reach out. We can always discuss if new indicators can be added. And in fact, most indicators that we have been added after a request from stakeholders. We're always very well open to adding more indicators in GloMIP. And then the last question, what is the timing? Again, let me maybe go back to impact opportunities. So generally, we show the most recent value that we have in terms of timing. So for the first one, which was undernourished population, I think we have data from 2018, 2019. And if you check the map, you always see that the year mentioned. In this case, you see 2018, 2019. That is the most recent value. That is when the data, when the indicator was measured, so 2018, 2019 as well. And that's also measured in the map. So these years refer to the most recent value we have available. Now, in some cases, we do have data projected into the future. So let me look for an example. So this one projected undernourishment. So if you click on this one, projected always means 2030 or 2050, depending on the data. Then you will see that the data year will be 2030. So some indicators also have a projected version, and then we have that one. We don't have change data, so we don't look at trends over time. We look at current values and future values. Those are the data that we have available in GloMIP. I know that Gary asked us if we can also have data on this productivity over time. Well, if you want this, you can check the crop observatories, which is a separate tool that tracks kind of yield improvement for different crops, different countries across time as well. So get data you can find in the crop observatory platform.
Thanks, Bert. We have a direct question from Gary. And apologies, as I just had it. Oh, there we go. I'll let you talk, Gary. Go ahead. You should be able to speak now, Gary. But we can't hear you. Oh, go ahead. Might be a problem on your end. In the meantime, there was an interesting question which Melanie answered in the chat from Renee around, have you seen that evidence that CGIAR breeding programs are using this information to drive change in their activities? And I think, Melanie, you've answered that quite correctly. I mean, this is a new tool. Bert, perhaps if you wanted to just recap when and how the tool was launched. We did have a webinar last week, but maybe you could just remind everyone here just a little bit about the history of GloMIP.
Yep, definitely. So the tool has been online for a year, maybe a bit more. It was launched officially, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago, but it has been available to collect feedback from stakeholders and users already for like, I think, 12 months or more. Because we do intend to make this collaborative effort in trying to collect all of this feedback from users, so users find it useful and credible to make sure that they will actually use it within their applications. And within ECG, it's already being used. We've used it to check how can we optimize allocation of resources across the CG, looking at those CG crops. It might also be useful to make programs to see how can we pinpoint some focus areas, some focus countries as well. So different applications are coming. Also, we'll be showcasing this like a science week. In case anybody wants to have a live session with us, please come to us at the GloMIP booth. And we're always happy to show you some applications and help you along with your specific project, with your specific question.
Thank you. Okay, we'll try with Gary again. Go ahead, Gary, go ahead. I'll try one more time. Go ahead, Gary. Okay. You might be having a problem with your microphone on your end, Gary. That's unfortunate, but please feel free to write another question in the chat. In the meantime, I think we'll go ahead, Neil, to start wrapping up the webinar. And please feel free to, again, ask any other more questions in the chat, and we'll attempt to answer them in the remaining minutes of the webinar as well. Neil, go ahead.
Thanks, Myla. So for all our audience, we want to share another Menti just to get your feedback regarding the webinar that we are having today. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Wait, I think I need to turn off my video. Okay. So you have access again to the Menti. Wait. Okay. Just go to menti.com and type the code again, 17272979, and feel free to answer the 4 questions that we have. So the first one is if the webinar provided a comprehensive demonstration of GloMIP uh, portal. Then another one is, sorry, um, after this Bert's presentation, uh, did you feel well informed about how to use GloMIP's IO portal? Then hopefully we are able to motivate you to explore more the IO portal. But feel free to send us a message or an email if you really want to learn more about how to use the IO portal. And we're really hoping that you'll recommend GloMIP to your colleagues as well. Maybe we'll give more, maybe 1 minute more. So I think it's okay. Uh, I'll give back the floor to you, Laila, for the announcement of
Great.
the next webinar.
Sure. Thank you. So everyone, there was actually a question in the chat around if we're going to be looking at the market segment section of GloMIP or the seed product market segment database, another important portal on GloMIP. And yes, the answer is there is going to be a webinar upcoming in July, date to be determined, which we'll be reviewing that as well. So that will be the next webinar in the GloMIP series. And also, sometime before then, we're also going to be holding another webinar. So we'll be having quite a few webinars coming up. But this webinar, not related to GloMIP, is around retail incentives for new seed products in Kenya, and that will be led by Dr. Sarah Kariuki, who's a CIMMYT scientist based in Kenya. So stay tuned for more information on that upcoming webinar as well. Over to you, Neil.
Mhm. Thank you, Laila. Sorry, I'm having some control issues with the Zoom. Sorry. Okay. Hopefully the block box are gone. So I'll give the floor to Ate Bing for the invitation to the CJR Science Week and for the closing remarks.
Thank you, Neil, and good evening, good morning to everyone. As we draw our webinar to a close, I want to take this opportunity to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Your presence and your active participation has made this event a success. And a special thank goes out to Bert. Over the past hour, Bert has shared with us the different features and functionalities of the Impact Opportunity Portal, and he has showed some relevant application. Bert, thank you for sharing this tool with us, and it is greatly appreciated. And also thank you to the men and women behind this webinar, Laila, Neil, for the excellent coordination, Miguel and Eduardo from CIMIP for the technical support, and for the ERI communications team for working on the promotional materials for the webinar series. And I would also like to acknowledge everyone for your active participation through the Q&A session. And it has really added great value to the discussion. And we hope we have provided the answers that are helpful, that the discussion have sparked new ideas and perspectives for you. And as we wrap up, I encourage you to check out the Impact Opportunity Portal and try using cases and examples from your own research. And let us continue this conversation beyond this webinar. Feel free to connect with us through our email address, glomip@erie.org. And you can also communicate with us through the platform, the glomipcgr.org. So after this webinar, you will receive a feedback form via email. Neil will send it to you. And please feel free to take a few minutes to complete the feedback form, because your insights, your feedback will help us improve and ensure that our future webinars will be more relevant and valuable to all of you. And also, I think Neil will show this screen. Stay tuned for our upcoming events. We have a lineup of exciting events and webinars. At the CGIAR Science Week, we will have a booth. It will be open for the whole week. And we also have a science talk scheduled on July 3. I hope you could also participate in that side event session. And there you go. That's the invitation for the Science Week side
So
event. Okay, that
I
will
can't
be
remove the
for
chat
July
box.
3.
Sorry.
Okay, well, so once again, thank you very much for being with us today. And on behalf of the entire team, I wish you all a wonderful day ahead. And we look forward to seeing you on our future events. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.